Hello, my name is Tommy, and welcome back to TR Street Mag, the show that teaches you valuable street photography insights, provides you with new perspectives, and helps you become more creative. If you do enjoy today's episode, make sure to drop a follow for new weekly episodes posted every Sunday. Let's get into today's topic, which is how to manage ADHD as a creative. So I first want to start off by saying that I personally have ADHD, and um, my experience, like most people, is you know both positive and negative. But for me, I personally look at ADHD as a kind of superpower, and some people may disagree with that, and that's okay. But I think it's important to see the positives of mental health, and it's no different for anxiety and any other type of neurodivergence, including autism, dyslexia. So a lot of the stuff that we will speak about in this episode can apply to neurodivergence in general. So my experience with my ADHD. So I knew that I had ADHD for like the last 4 years, and I only just got diagnosed last year with combined ADHD. For those of you that don't know, ADHD is a specific learning disability. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. So, ADHD is basically a combination of inattention and hyperactivity, right? There's like two sides of it, right? So, for me, I'm obviously combined, which means I struggle with both sides of it. I am more inattentive than hyperactive, but I basically have nearly all of the criteria. It is different for some people. Some people might be, they might just have enough symptoms to be diagnosed combined. But yeah, you might get diagnosed one or the other. So so how it affects me? Well, I think for a long time, I struggle with impulsivity and just managing my time and managing my emotions, and struggling to kind of regulate, which means kind of how my brain reacts to emotions, and like how you go about your life. And I probably am a little bit more positive than a lot of people. I say a lot of people, maybe struggle with the impulsivity side of it. So they can be quite reckless with their money, and they can often feel quite distracted. They make reckless decisions that they go on to regret later. It can also affect like your appetite, your sleep. It often comes with anxiety. It affects anxiety. So ADHD is basically like an inner drive, like a little engine inside of you that's always wanting to do things, basically. And the reason I wanted to talk about this as part of being a creative is because many people with ADHD and neurodivergence are very creative. And you'd be surprised how many similarities there are between ADHD and just creativity in general, and just art in general. So even if you don't have ADHD, you might relate in some way. So yeah, let's get into our next topic, which is a question that someone has asked me for this episode, which is, how do I hyperfocus on one thing at a time? So, the person who asked me this, they said they were thinking about writing multiple books, and they want to do all 5 books at once. There's no doubt that they want to write all of them. So how do you go about managing that as a creative? So the first method that I just advise these things in general to anyone, by the way, and not just to manage ADHD, but just to manage your life. Just so it kind of relates to everyone. So the way that I would go about handling that is that I would write them all down, because when you write them down on paper, and this is important, it has to be paper. You can write them down on your phone, but it often doesn't have the same impact. When you write something down on paper, you're more likely to remember it, because it's all about intention setting. So if you intended to write 5 books, right? We're not going to do them all at once, but it's achievable. Of course it is. I think the important thing is, once you write a little list, it's like a little reminder to you every day. Okay, these are the things I want to achieve. And but how do I get started on that, right? So how you get started on that is, once you've written them down, you can look at it and be like, well, which one do I feel drawn to the most? And if you end up coming to like conclusion, okay, these 2 or these 3, I want to write the most. Like I could start writing them right now, right? This applies to anything. Like if you're a graphic designer and you've got like 3 projects you want to start, this applies to you as well. And I think you'd really just have to be patient with yourself, which I know is really hard, especially as a creative as well. You have to be patient, because if you're not patient, you will find it hard to execute those ideas, or you'll find it hard to start those projects in the long term. If you want to be successful, it's better to break things down into small chunks. And you might have heard that before and thought, that's not going to work. It will work, but I think you have to accept that you need to be patient. I think acceptance in general, with most of the tips that I would give, you have to accept that things are going to be slower than, your brain might work really fast. And, maybe you will write 5 books, this week, because don't underestimate the power of ADHD, right? But I think when you break things down to small chunks and you say, well, okay, there's 2. A 2, I now can't decide, right? So I give it a couple of more days. I'd advise like another week, right? If ADHD is not something that you actively struggle with, I would probably wait another week, right? If you still can't decide after another week, then I would delegate your days, so that you do, say, a Monday, you would start writing book 1, and then the other end of the week, so you give yourself time to think in between book 1 and book 2. So the other end of the week, we start writing ideas down for the second one, right? So I think that would be really helpful, because then twice a week you can say that I am working towards my goals, and it's not going to happen overnight. You have to remember the phrase that Rome weren't built in a day, right? So you have to accept that the process is, it has to start somewhere. And second of all, that you've done such a good job already now, because you're like, okay, well, I've started, right? I don't need to like think about the first chapter. Just start writing ideas. And yeah, I think that's probably the best thing to do. But in other circumstances, like if it wasn't writing a book, it would be like, maybe it would be studying. Like how can I, especially if it's something, say, you wasn't that interested in, but you had to do it, right? So this is where like timing is like really important, because if you learn to like do things in small chunks, like you're like, okay, I'm going to do something I don't really like for 10 minutes. And if I feel like doing another 10 minutes, I'll do another 10 minutes, but then I'll stop, right? And you're just like, okay, every couple of days I'm just going to do that, or once a week I'm going to do that. And you might find over time you start to like the thing that you hated. You know, you hate doing it, and you might start to like it, and you might never like it, by the way. You know, I can understand that. You might never like something, but you just get in the habit. Once you build a habit, you know, I didn't always like brushing my teeth. Now I like brushing my teeth, and now sometimes I just brush my teeth because I know I have to, you know, because it's essential. And you have to, you know, this is where acceptance is such a big thing. You have to accept that if you do this thing, it's going to help you get to your goal, right? So yeah, I would use that. So anyway, let's move on to the next subject, which is the struggle with executive dysfunction. So for those of you that don't know, executive dysfunction refers to a range of cognitive, emotional, and behavioral difficulties in managing daily tasks, planning, organizing, initiating actions, and regulating emotions. It is a set of symptoms, but not a diagnosis, and it often shows up in ADHD and autism as well. So basically what it means is that let's kind of backtrack a little bit with the hyperfocus thing. So you want to hyperfocus on a task, but there's so much mental stimulation just to do the task. So that's where executive dysfunction comes in, because that's like knowing that, like, okay, it's going to take me so much energy just to do this thing, right? I think it's one of the things, you know, like I say, that comes with acceptance. Like, you have to just accept that, like, it's going to be like, you know, days or like weeks where like you're literally not going to do anything productive. And if you're like me, and I love productivity, I love it. I love doing stuff that, you know, kind of, it fuels my brain. And I need to do, you know, stuff during the week that fuels my creativity. And that includes, you know, organizing my room, or, um, you know, even doing a little bit of research towards some of my assignments. Or, you know, it could literally be as simple as like going to the shop and getting some milk, or getting some bottles of water, and then walking back home. You never have to think, oh, well, I need to do like a million things. I need to like clean my entire room. Like, the thing is, you just clean something in your room, right? That's it. And tomorrow or next week, clean something else. And if you feel like cleaning the whole room, I'm not saying don't do it, because if that makes you feel better, then do it. But sometimes you don't have to feel like you need to clean your whole room. Just do a little bit of it. And if you feel like doing more, do more. And you feel like giving up, that's okay, right? So we've already spoken about this a little bit, but we can move on now to acceptance of impulsivity and inattention. So like I say, we've already spoken about acceptance, you know, kind of since the start and throughout each one so far. So yeah, the kind of main symptoms of ADHD, you know, you have the hyperactivity side, and then you have the inattentive side. So basically it's like comparing something that, you know, it keeps moving no matter what, compared to something that's completely still. That's the two sides of ADHD. And, you know, for some people like me, there is no in between. So, um, yeah, I think once you learn to like kind of be like, okay, well, I'm gonna be a little bit insane sometimes. I'm gonna be a little bit like, I feel like I'm driving people mad, or, you know, and maybe people will tell you that that's genuinely part of it. But I think sometimes you also in that context have to accept that, like, you're not always ever going to be everyone's cup of tea, and not everyone will be accepting of your ADHD either. But it's also important to kind of like, you know, stay authentic and stuff. Like, I'm very vocal about my ADHD, but I don't walk around saying, "Oh, I've got ADHD, everyone." You know what I mean? So as long as you accept yourself and accepts that sometimes that you're not gonna be the brightest spark in the room. Once you start to like accept that sometimes you're late to things and sometimes you forget your keys and stuff like that. I mean, you can set reminders on your phone, like pick up my keys or, um, I still use reminders. I use, calendars, all sorts of things. Literally ask other people, can you remind me to do this, tomorrow, whatever, because it helps kind of, initiating some tasks. You don't have to carry everything on your own. You have to remember that. So yeah, I think it's really important, acceptance, because when you do become accepting of the bad side, you'll start to flourish in your creative side. So anyway, let's move on to how to manage your time effectively. So there's lots of different things you can do, and it's something I'm still actively working on. So something, as I've mentioned previously, is setting reminders. I would use my iPhone's Apple reminders, and I also use my calendar. So my calendar is actually quite effective, really, because I can, say someone wants to plan something with me, I can look at certain dates and pin stuff in. And then a good thing with like the reminder side of things is that I can put lots of reminders throughout the day to do this at a certain time and maybe remind me, like 30 minutes before that thing's going to happen. So that helps me kind of keep on top of like, making sure I do things at certain times of the day. I don't always like do everything. Like, say for example, every Sunday I've do some yoga, and I haven't. I was doing so well with that for ages. I was doing it every week, and um, I often do that after exercise. But yeah, I feel like I deleted that from my calendar because I feel like I just do that when I need to do it now. Really, I enjoy doing yoga. Um, but yeah, it's just stuff like that. It might be like you take some time out your day to do certain activities because you need to help your body like regulate your emotions and stuff like that. I mean, you can set alarms for things as well. Um, like say, you can also delegate. You can ask, people around you to, can you remind me to do this tomorrow? Blah de blah. But yeah, I think sticky notes and reminders are probably your best kind of method. And also, like I said earlier, writing things down is really good. I feel like I do use my notes on my phone, but I use my notes on my phone when, like, say someone's telling me something and I write it on my notes, and I don't always remember to go back onto that. Actually, there's so many distractions on your phone, right? You've got apps, games, emails, messages, phone calls. So I'm not always like going in and out of my notes, right? So that's why it's so important to write things down on paper. Like I call it my journal, like a diary basically. But I don't like filling something out every day. I don't have any like days of the weeks or I don't even write times on there. I literally just fill it in. I'm like, okay, I'm going to achieve this week. This is what I've been focused on. I've been taking it by week. So as long as I've done one thing this week towards my goals, you know, that's good. So maybe that will help you as well. Maybe if you do something every week. Um, yeah, as long as you're doing that thing, I think the thing is, as a creative, you might have a lot of things to do. And it's like, how do you manage that over your week? Well, you know, you might spend a lot of time gaming when really you should be, working on creative projects and um, even just like practicing. And it can be. See, the thing with photography as well is it can literally be as something as simple as like going on. Um, Unsplash is a good website for this, and so is Visco, and I mean, you could do this on Instagram as well, but I mean, I think really it'd be better to like look at websites or look at um, galleries like Unsplash where you can kind of search terms and use that for inspiration. And that's obviously going to be good for your brain as well. So we mentioned the next topic a little bit already, but some techniques to manage your ADHD as a creative. I think some of the most important techniques would be kind of just daily advice that we'd give to everyone. Make sure you take the time, maybe 10 minutes or half an hour or an hour, to go for a walk every day. This is on top of exercise. Make sure you're going for taking regular breaks. You're moving your body, because what you have to remember is for those of us that have our neurodivergence, we need to be flowing our energy around our body. And if we're always sitting there, we're not, we can do creative things, we can draw, we can, do 3D modeling, creating games and doing, productive stuff as part of our businesses, reaching out to clients and whatever it may be. And even buying like camera gear and stuff, right? We can take time to do all of that stuff, but if we're not going outside and letting that energy flow, I think it's important to go for walks as well, because you'll often get some of your greatest ideas, especially with stuff that you may be struggling with. Like, for me as a university student, they might be, I need to just go for a walk and just have a little think on my walk, like how I'm going to write like a paragraph for an essay. I know, I know, boring, but it could be as simple as that. It could be, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to listen to some music. And maybe you're just going to go for a walk and, sit by a lake or like go and watch the birds or something. Just take your mind off a little bit and remember that you're a human at the end of the day. Like, it's all part of your experience of life. So it's important to take some time to yourself sometimes. But yeah, exercise, that's a big one. Exercise is important. If you're not avid of the gym, maybe it's something, as simple as yoga can be exercised, right? I know that's something the girls like more than the guys, but I actually love yoga. And if you are a guy and you've always been thinking about trying it, I really would try it. It's done so much good for my mind. It's made me relax. You can do a little bit of meditation as well during it. I feel like it's like you need mindfulness during your day. Like, if you're not into meditation, right? Mindfulness can be as simple as like taking some time to journal, or just to sit in silence, or just to not be, just to be present. There's a term in Japan called Wu Wei, which means the art of non-action. And it basically talks about action that comes through stillness. So the whole point of mindfulness is that when you're not thinking about such and such, you're often kind of letting life flow more naturally. Because if you're always trying to force, you're always trying to think like, well, But if I'm not doing something, like, how is that going to help me? But you can drive yourself mad doing that, right? You can make yourself burn out more if you do that. If you're constantly in a state of, I need to be doing something in order to be successful, that's not really how it works. Um, but yeah, there's this whole thing in Japan that I really respect. There's Wu Wei, which is the art of non-action. It's spelled WU and then Wei, WEI, Wu Wei. They also have another one called Ikigai, and Ikigai is like to have an Ikigai is like a purpose in life, right? So they have a lot of nice terms, to be fair. But yeah, I'm always very respectful towards Japanese culture because, yeah, they just have a lot of like cool things that I can incorporate, like, in my own neurodivergence. And it's kind of like rewiring your brain into thinking that, like, yeah, I don't always need to be doing something. So, like I say, acceptance is important because once you start to accept that, okay, well, maybe if I don't do anything, what will happen? And try it, right? Try it. Don't just do it one day. Do it for like a whole week or a whole month. I'd say a whole month, right? To notice. After a month, you might not feel like you achieved anything from it, but it's to kind of train your mind that, like, you don't always need to be doing something. And I feel like the more you do that, you know, the easier it is to manage tasks and the easier it is to get through the day, and the less likely you'll get your executive dysfunction. You're always going to have your symptoms that you struggle with more than others, but if you reduce the frequency of how much you get done, that's really important. And if that's something that you want to work on, I would highly advise trying that. Okay, so last two things I want to talk about. Letting yourself flourish, fueled by your own ADHD. So when we talk about, like, kind of the positives of ADHD, so if we channel that impulsivity and hyperactivity, if we play into our strengths a little bit, like, some of my strengths, which, doesn't really make much sense with ADHD, but organization actually is one of my strengths. And I like to have some sort of system going on with everything that I do now. I love to have and it doesn't mean that I am the tidiest person. I'm still messy in some forms. I'm happy now. But yeah, some of my strengths, my organization, I have quite an analytical brain. I see things that other people don't see, and I think outside the box most of the time. So, I just allow myself to do that. I just like explored that. It like accepts exploring it. And don't always feel like your answer, because your answer's so different, that it's wrong. Because honestly, I think it's nice sometimes to have an answer that doesn't fit into the criteria, because you start to, like, give permission to not just yourself but other people around you to think outside the box and to think differently. Those big picture thinkers are literally the reason that most things are the way they are in the world. I mean, some of the most famous artists in the world, Leonardo da Vinci, even Einstein. I know Einstein, he weren't an artist, but he was, one of the smartest people who've ever lived. And he thought outside the box. So, I'm not saying that we're all Einstein, but don't feel like you have to play by the rules or kind of fit into a criteria. Because remember that a lot of us are quite similar. And you'll meet your people one day, right? You'll meet your people and people will have a lot of respect for you and the way that you think. So just because it's not working out right now, or some things are not working the way you'd like them to, doesn't mean you give up, and it doesn't mean that you don't, keep trying to go down that avenue. Especially from a creative process, because remember that art is quite subjective. And not everyone's going to like the way that you do things, but if you like the way that you do it, who cares what, other people think? Maybe one day your idea is great and someone likes it enough to like promote it or give you loads of credit for it, and it makes you feel great about yourself, and you want to keep doing more. You know what I mean? And like I say, this that just really applies to anyone in life, right? It applies to anyone. I've spoken a lot about neurodivergence this episode, but it really applies to anyone, any sort of creative. I think it's so easy with social media, and we'll kind of move on to anxiety as the kind of last topic of the episode. It's so easy with social media that you see such and such doing something, and you want to do that, or you want to do it in your way. Like, don't let anyone stand in front of you and say like that your way is wrong. Like, you can teach people your perspective. It might take you a while, and you might struggle to even articulate your own feelings. That's something I struggle with. So don't feel alone in that. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on anxiety, because anxiety obviously comes a little bit with ADHD. I actually discovered a term called hypervigilance. And through learning a little bit about hypervigilance, I've kind of gained a lot of clarity and a lot of insight into kind of how my brain works and how my body works. So hypervigilance is like the body's state of fight, flight, or freeze. Say when you were little, right? You were having a great time around the playground, and you fell over, and in that moment of falling over, your body's like, it's everything's, you're in danger, and it turns on this little switch, right? And your body's in this state of alert, right? So hypervigilance is like a constant state of being on alert. So the reason I'm bringing it up and why it can be beneficial to you to know what that means is that ADHD, it goes so hand in hand with anxiety. So ADHD is, like I said earlier, it's like a driving motor, right? So any time that something stresses you out, like a social situation, right, it massively influences the anxiety that you feel. And that's called psychosocial, is a term that I've just learned. And I would never have learned it unless I'd have finally understood what hypervigilance means. So just know that it's normal to feel like that. It's normal to be, and it's not nice. I agree. It's not nice how to deal with it. Don't let everything build up. Don't let all the tension build up. Don't bottle it up, because through learning about this, I have learned that your body will store the energy from your brain, because there's a direct link between your brain and your nervous system, and your body, when you're stressed, will build the tension up in like the upper part of your body, and it like connects to all your nerves and stuff, right? So yeah, it could literally like manifest in any area of your body, really. It often stores around your neck, shoulders, stuff like that. And I've actually just found out that like recently that I've had this big knot in my back for the last like 9 months. And I thought I was injured like so many times. And it's really just a psychological thing. It's a link between my anxiety and my ADHD. So it's really important that like, I kind of bring some kind of awareness to this, because I feel quite happy in general, but and I'm quite an upbeat person, but I've been dealing with that for like, you know, most of the last year, and it's not nice. And yeah, if you don't feel like, tense in any sort of area, I'm just saying, this is why it's so important to keep your energy flowing, and to kind of um keep moving, because you're letting the energy flow around your body, and it's important to be mindful and to find ways to kind of, let that kind of stress and energy out, and even anxiety as well. And it's important to also talk to people. Talking might not really be your thing. It could be something like exercise, it could be music, it could be writing, it could be anything. But there's lots of ways that you can manage things, and it might be a lot of trial and error and stuff. But yeah, trust me. I really hope that you found this episode helpful. I hope you've learned a little bit about, you know, my own experience, and also some things that I've kind of discovered that will hopefully help you. So yeah. Anyway, so thank you for listening to today's episode. If you did enjoy, please feel free to comment and drop me a follow so we can stay connected. I also run my own workshops and provide mentoring to all level of photographers. So if that's something you'd be interested in, you can drop me a follow over on Instagram. And I'd also just like to say that I am going to be publishing some video content around my podcast in the coming weeks. So you'll hopefully see my face soon. So yes, I will see you in the next episode, and thank you for listening.